Mr. Bami, Mr. Ajay Shankar also has joined. Other distinguished participants. We have the chairman of Central City Authority, Mr. Arya. Of course, Mr. Bajaj, who has just spoken as the chairman of our vertical on power sector in the India Energy Forum. We have Shravan Kumar and Mr. Bawa from Central City Authority. I'm told Mr. Joshi would join a little later from Tehri, and all other participants. We felt it very essential that in the emerging context of renewables globally, and particularly in India, where we have been branded and we are heavily fossil fuel centric power sector development that we have in the country, the need for looking at hydropower development, it was always there, but it has assumed a great degree of renewed relevance and significance. As Mr. Bajaj mentioned just now, somewhere in 2003, we ranked the entire hydropower potential of the country out of almost 400 projects. We identified projects with 50,000 aggregate capacity. So we, Honorable Prime Minister then, Shri Atal Bihari, respected Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, launched this 50,000 megawatt hydroelectric initiative for hydro companies to quickly prepare pre-feasibility reports, and they did. The Central City Authority coordinated that work. Mr. Bajaj was there then, and we did that. And idea was that once these pre-feasibility reports have been done, that should follow out of so many projects identified. This 50,000 megawatts would be one after another in sequence or in parallel in many parts of the country. It should be moving forward. But then, because of our other policy initiatives, boosting the power capacity of the country, of course, we needed that, and we have got it from just about 100,000 megawatt when we entered this century. Today, we have close to 400,000 megawatt of capacity in the country, so we should be proud of that. But that has seen hydropower project capacity potential or installed capacity potential, which is 150,000 megawatt. The proportion has gone down to something like 13-14%, and it is going down further the last 15-20 years as the other capacities have enhanced. Hydro capacity has gone down. And I wouldn't say it was forgotten, because always we had the idea of reviewed policy. So in between also policy revisions took place, but I don't think they found sufficient response by developers, whether public sector developers or private sector developers in particular. I remember we went to Arunachal Pradesh and we had all our public sector hydro companies and also NTPC, which is also doing hydro. And we did the MOU in one day, something like 25,000 megawatt capacity MOU. But these have remained dormant. So neither the public sector took it up nor the private sector took it up in a significant way. And therefore, it has been very slow growth of hydro capacity in the country. Now, hydro is attempting to, and rightly so, deservedly, a new dimension in the context of massive solar capacity expansion that is on cards. Already, we have done a lot, and a lot more has been planned to be done at the highest level of the Prime Minister. And the whole government is committed to expanding renewable capacity. Of course, hydro is also renewable, but particularly in terms of wind and solar in a significant way. And that has confronted the planners and executors and managers of the power sector to ensure how do we manage the grid when large capacity of something like 200,000 megawatt, 300,000 megawatt, finally 500,000 megawatt in terms of solar, maybe in 10 years, maybe a little more than 10 years, when they come to the grid, how do we foresee the grid to be managed when that capacity is simply not available in evenings? And therefore, we have started a renewed effort on hydropower development and pump storage both. And therefore, there is some activity. So it is a good thing. Of course, there are some inherent difficulties in development of hydropower, particularly in India, because of the very fragile geology of Himalayan region. I was closely associated with some of the very, very difficult projects. I remember Tehri, we got it done. Sardar Sarovar, we got it done. Napta Jakri, we got it done. Dulhasti, we got it done. Baglihar had a serious problem. Tista 5, we had faced number of difficulties in geological surprises and many others. And I made it a point to almost every week, if not every, every fortnight, if not every week, to visit one or the other of these hydro projects. And we got the benefits of many of the projects which are struggling for decades coming to the grid. So it requires a great deal of patience. It requires a great deal of thoughtfulness to sort out issues which are there. As mentioned rightly by Mr. Bajaj, contracting issues, we get stuck up. We get stuck up and we get stuck up for not 1 year, 2 years, we get stuck up for several years. So therefore, the contracting philosophy has to change. The mindset of people at large has to change, and we have to do a lot, both government as well as the companies which are engaged in hydropower development. Even today, I will not say that there is a very positive mind or positive mindset and positive perception about hydropower. When we had the devastation in Uttarakhand, it is Tehri which saved a couple of the cities down the line. But then that is not known. People feel the devastation part and then they blame hydropower development. So I think perception in the country to support hydropower development, despite some of the difficulties that are faced, is very, very important. And all of us have to work in changing that perception. The government and developers and the society, NGOs' minds have to be changed to in favor of hydropower development because of the enormous benefits that they bring. But having said that, I would also admit that project developers also have to be a little more considerate, more careful, more caring on rehabilitation resettlement. I could see very directly in case of Tehri, and also I think Indira Sagar project. That was another important project in Madhya Pradesh. How a more caring consideration could make some difference, if not the total difference. So I think that is one of the very important dimensions of hydropower development. Of course, it needs a new policy regime. We have to persuade our bankers to favor and to consider long-term financing of the projects. We have to persuade to start with our public sector companies, which have been busy engaged in the hydropower development, and that includes also NTPC, which is a large financial base and a great expertise on project management, to get back to this hydropower development, because it will take time before private sector makes up its mind, because private sector does not have, to my mind, that type of patience which hydropower project development. So let's admit this. Let us first create a cultural change and a mindset change, and then maybe private sector may come in. But to start with now, I think a renewed effort is needed to get all, and fortunately we have some good instruments, good public sector companies dealing with hydropower development in the country. I think long-term financing, and we have suggested backloading of tariff, because to start with, our power purchase agreement is not accepted by most of the distribution companies, because to start with, hydropower cost is high. And through ingenuity, innovative backloading of tariff without hurting anybody financially, and banks on our side, it could be possible that tariff in the beginning is not that high, but later on, after 10, 15 years, when the loan, etc., reduces, depreciation happens, then the tariff becomes a little higher. So I think, like we did, I personally was involved in fixing the tariff of Tala project in Bhutan for 35 years, slowly growing to the higher figure, but in the beginning less, and it became very, very smooth. So that is another important thing that perhaps could be needed in case of hydropower. Another mechanism that can be done, that create right in the beginning in the contracting document a very high level technical and financial team of independent individuals whose eminence and whose integrity is beyond doubt, so that the issues which they crop up in contract management, in execution, primarily because of geological surprises, primarily because of construction surprises, those issues still of remaining unattended and unresolved for years get resolved in terms of few months. That mechanism should be part of the contracting document. And that should see that this high level committee, and we should have trust in that high level committee, and that high level committee should conduct in a manner that they are trustworthy. I mean, that is the way it has to be done. So I think unless we do a few things, not many things. One, creating the mindset in favor of hydro project in the country, which is not very high, that needs to be done, government as the developers. Long-term financing, backloading of tariff, and better contracting document, which does not lead to litigations, doesn't lead to more disputes. It does recognize that hydropower development has inherent surprises. We must accept it. And those inherent surprises should be resolved as soon as they are discovered, rather than waiting for somebody and so many inquiries and all sorts of investigations. So these are some of the things when they are done, I think hydropower, and of course, bringing back the public sector companies. Couple of points, pump storage was again forgotten. I was in some way connected with Purulia pump storage scheme, West Bengal. I mean, whichever pump storage has been done, we were at that time thinking, sort of condemning that pump storage is an unworkable thing. Today, in the revised context of solar, I think it has to be revisited. That conclusion has to be revisited. I am happy that Central City Authority, Government of India, and many of the state governments have gone back to this, and they are trying to see what are the possibilities, which places of hydro projects which are already there in place, we should use this and try to develop pump storage, because on the battery, there is some sort of uncertainty. It may take time. And if we have to have our solar program succeeding, then this is one of the solutions, besides hydropower in general itself. I think once again, welcome on behalf of the India Energy Forum, all the eminent speakers, particularly the chairman of Central City Authority, who has taken time to spend with us and explain what is going on, and all the delegates. Thanks a lot. Let us put some concluding remarks. This session has been very useful. We are very happy that the presentations made by the CA team, chaired by the chairman CA himself, has been very, very educative. And one should be encouraged to see that a lot of concerns and a lot of preparations are going on. Some of the things have already happened, and others are already in the pipeline. As in one of the presentations they made, that is still further improvements in policy, further improvement of policy procedure, etc., is being worked out. So I think government concern, CA's concern, that is clearly reflected, and it's very positive development that this hydropower in general and pump storage in particular, both are being encouraged, and let us hope that things will be all right. One of the points that was made, I think, in one of the presentation by CEA, that you would expect this public sector, actually private sector, as I had also mentioned that point, we have tried it for several years now. Private sector doesn't have the patience now to get into hydro, wait for 7, 8, 9, 10 years for their equity to wait for any return. And it has been seen that by and large, that is, I mean, it's not to reflect on the management capability of private sector, but the risks associated are so much. And to handle that risk, and for the authorities to accept a concession to handle, or any dispensation to handle that risk is so huge that they would be reluctant to do it. It may, in case of public sector, there could be a little more flexibility that can be handled. So therefore, in the interim period till private sector gets interested to get into hydropower in a big way, I think we will have to do with the public sector. Later on, if you want to monetize it, that can be possible. That will more and more. If you want, if public sector has money, all the money, then they can go on adding at any point of time after doing this. Because construction risks, in spite of the fact that some presentation by CA was very clear that we are trying to perfect the process of investigation, but anyway, it will be there. Whatever perfection you do on geological investigations, as you go along, there could be difficulties. And disputes during contracting stage become so complicated that even public sector will be difficult to handle, but private sector cannot get the dispensation and they cannot do this. So that is one point. The second point that I came up in one of the presentations, perhaps CA chairman himself said, or one of the presentation, that not CA, the presentation made by the chief engineer, that we would expect lower return on equity. If you remember, in between a regulatory commission and ministry put together, they increased the return on hydro because the gestation of equity investment is much longer. Gestation of equity investment in thermal power is in the range of 3 to 4 years. But gestation to get into any situation of a return is 8, 10 years in the case of hydropower. So I think that will have to be reviewed. I'm not saying that one is in favor or against that point, but it shouldn't happen that instead of incentivizing and motivating people to get into it, you may get into a situation that you are, in fact, not liberalizing the investment climate in case of hydro, but you are making it a little more restrictive. That is a very forthright point. And I say I don't have a fixed view on that. But that matter has to be very seriously considered because when I think 16% was increased to some 17% or something like that, or 18%, because of the waiting period of equity during construction stage. Still, the hydro project developer, both in public sector and private sector, they were not quite happy, and I do see some sympathy for that because they have to wait on this. Then this dispute resolution mechanism as brought out during presentation, and also Ajay Shankar made that point. I also made in my introductory remarks that we will have to have the contracting strategy so well structured and the draft prepared very well so that it lends itself to a quicker review and quicker examination of the issues that we get confronted during construction stage and disposal of that issue or redressal of that issue. Okay, it's a high level technical team of eminent persons whose integrity cannot be doubted could be put in place so that these mechanisms work out the solutions to the problem where we're, like Parvati was mentioned. Parvati became a long story. Parvati 2 has become a long story because of the tunnel boring machine or something like that. So we get into situation of IDC increasing, lot of investment made, and project becoming. Financing, I think that point has not come out perhaps in CA presentation, but need to be strongly recommended to the government that we should take up with the financing institutions like LIC and others who has long, or even pension fund nowadays is putting money. Unless you give long-term financing which eases the burden on tariff, I think affordability of hydropower project development right in the beginning and having PPA would be difficult. So long-term funding and backloading of tariff, a point that I also made. Pump storage, I would have felt with both the sort of presentations, some sort of a clarity should have come that how much of power we are needing to pump and how much of power we are getting. What I have understood that you have to put 2 units to get 1 unit. And in that case, a point was made by Mr. Verma, and that's the right point, that if you have to use your thermal power, then the same question of your greenhouse gas will come. I think today with solar becoming available in such large measure, not today, maybe in coming years even more, Then during the daytime, you use the solar power, which could be in the range of 2 rupee 50 paise or 3 rupees, so that even if you use 2 units of solar power to get 1 unit of hydropower from the pump storage, still its affordability can be explained in terms of the alternate battery backup and others being very high. So I think those are the policy level issues on pump storage. Clarity should be brought out. If there is confusion even at the level of policy making, then investment will be very difficult by public sector as well as private sector. Most of the public sector are listed companies now. They have independent directors in their board. Certain amount of persuasion can be made from the public, from the government, but beyond a point, they all have to run on a professional basis, and their board of directors, their independent directors will question them. So therefore, even though it is comparatively easier to handle some of the difficult financial and contractual situation in case of private public sector, still it will be better that at the policy level, better degree of clarity. But on the whole, I am very happy that CA has done a lot of work to support the ministry in this. The amount of thoughts that have gone into this, I was amazed that so many issues you have been able to bring out. And one group has already put the further recommendations. I hope Ministry of Power would handle those recommendations. This is high time it is brought into action by proper policy and proper persuasion. But persuasion will go up to a point. We should expect commercial dispensation even in respect of public sector undertakings. So I think with these words, I thank you all, and I'm educated more. And in 2 hours' time, I'm educated more on whatever is being done, and it's a great thing. And I'm again very thankful on behalf of the India Energy Forum to Mr. Arya and his team, both I think Mr. Shravan and Mr. Baba, both of them. All the three have done a great job, and so Mr. Joshi from Tehri, of course, I can never forget. I used to visit every 15, 20 days, and you got the Tehri online. So I think recently also I had gone to Tehri to see how it is working on. So it's very well. It's a pride of the nation. Thank you very much. All the best.